So again, the creditor can have the right of choice if agreed between them in alternative obligations. What about loss of the thing? Who is liable? Now, if the thing is lost due to the fault of the debtor, say for example an alternative, if one thing is lost, the remedy of the creditor is that he can choose from any of the remaining objects plus indemnity for damages. So let's say for example uh, in this example given, if Leia lost the Sony TV, then the remedy of fair is to choose from the remaining objects. So she may choose, Fair may choose either the serious system or the cash of 50,000 pesos plus payment of damages. What about if all things were lost due to the debtor's fault? So in this case, the debtor is bound to pay to the creditor the value of the object which disappeared lastly. Yeah. So if it can be established, if all things were lost and it was the Sony TV which got lost lastly, so it's the 60,000 pesos value would be the reckoning value for the damages plus damages. What if the loss of the thing was due to the creditor's fault? If one thing is lost, then the debtor can choose to cancel the obligation and collect payment of damages from the creditor. But if all things were lost, then the creditor pays the debtor the value of all the things plus payment of damages. So please take note if the thing is lost without the debtor's fault, like fortuitous event, the obligation shall be extinguished. So anyone can remember what the fortuitous events are? So again, they are typhoon, force majeure like typhoon, or acts of God like typhoon, flood, earthquake, COVID-19 plague or pandemic, and acts of men like kudeta, riot, or war. No? These are fortuitous events. In this case, loss of the thing due does not make the debtor liable. Obligation shall be extinguished. Now, there are also obligations according to plurality of object. And the last one is facultative. When is it facultative? When only one object agreed to be when there's only one object agreed to be delivered, but the debtor this time may substitute it with another object. Example, Don promised to give Joe his Apple laptop with serial number 112233. But before delivery, Don has the option to substitute the laptop with a Yamaha jet ski. Should be no N here. A Yamaha jet ski. So in cases, there's a substitute. The main prestation or the principal object is the Apple laptop, while the Yamaha jet ski is the substitute. So in this case, this is a facultative obligation. So what if the thing due was lost by the debtor's fault? Due to the fault of the debtor. Let's say the Apple laptop was lost due to the fault of the debtor. So number one, the principal object is lost, so the debtor is liable for damages. What about if the Yamaha was lost due to the fault of the debtor? So loss of the jet ski, which is the substitute. What's the rule here? The debtor is not liable, but still bound to deliver the principal object, which is the laptop. Okay, so don't forget, loss of the substitute, even though the debtor is at fault, he is not liable. Now let's discuss plurality of subject, which are the active and passive subjects, or the creditor and debtor. If there is only one debtor and only one creditor, then it's called simple obligation. Example, again, Anne obliged herself to give May her 18-karat gold necklace. In this example, there's only one debtor, who is Anne, and there is only one creditor, who is May. So in this case, this is a simple obligation. It becomes joint when there are two or more debtors or two or more creditors who are bound to deliver proportionately or perform. So each of the obligation is separate and distinct from that of the others. Example, D and E promise to pay X and Y 60,000 pesos jointly. So who are the obligors or debtors of this case, of this example? D and E. And the creditors are X and Y. And what is the object or prestation? 60,000 pesos. So upon maturity, if X collects from D, so the creditor X collects from debtor D, how much should D pay? Answer is, D is only bound to pay 15,000 pesos. Why? Because each obligation is separate and distinct from that of the other. What does that mean? This obligation to X is separate and distinct from, number one, this obligation to Y. Number two, E's obligation to X. And number three, E's obligation to Y. So in this case, in this example, where D and E promise to pay X and Y 60,000 pesos jointly, there are all in all 4 obligations. Number one, D's obligation to X. Number two, D's obligation to Y. Number three, E's obligation to X. And number 4, E's obligation to Y. So there are 4 obligations all in all. So by getting 4, how did we get 15,000 pesos? Simply by dividing 60,000 pesos, this one, divided by 4 obligations, which gives us 15,000 pesos. Or, make it simpler, 60,000 pesos divided by the number of persons or parties, D, E, X, and Y. So D, E, X, and Y. All in all, 4 persons. So 60,000 divided by 4 persons will give you 15,000 pesos for each obligation. So if E will pay X, so E is bound only to deliver 15,000 pesos. If E will pay Y, E will only pay 15,000 pesos, and so on and so forth. So question, what are words to express that the obligation is joint? These are the following words: jointly, proportionately, pro rata, non comunada, non comandante. So in our example, it is the word jointly. Okay. So the third kind of plurality of subject is solidary obligation. Now in this obligation, in order to be solidary, the law requires that it should be expressed in stipulation, or it should be provided by law or by the nature of the obligation. So if there is no term or no word expressing that the obligation is solidary, then it is joint. No? In this case, there are still numerous debtor and numerous creditor. So what are the different words to express solidarity? These are the words: co-maker, joint and several. So take note of this one: joint and several, very tricky. So if joint only, that's joint. If there is joint and several, it's accompanied by the word several, it becomes solidary. Pro indiviso, in solidum, or by using the pronoun I instead of we. Example: I promise to pay C and D, so there are two creditors, 50,000 pesos on January 1 of the following year. Signed X and Y. So in this example, X and Y made a promissory note to pay C and D 50,000 pesos on January 1 the following year. So instead of using pronoun we, they both signed using the pronoun I here. So the pronoun I will make the obligation solidary, not joint. So what's the difference between solidary from joint? Here, upon maturity, either X or Y, so the debtors, either X or Y, shall be bound to pay either to C or D the amount 50,000 pesos. So in one payment only, no? You don't have to divide 50,000 by the number of parties. But this time it's solidary, the whole amount is demandable or it becomes due. So to whom should it be paid? Either C or D. So question, if C will demand from X, how much should X pay? 50,000 pesos. Or if D will demand from Y, how much should Y pay? 50,000 pesos. Okay.